Welcome to Fiction Mage. Tonight, we invite you to settle in, breathe deeply, and begin a quiet journey through a world of imagination, memory, and beloved characters. Let the story guide you gently, one scene at a time, toward rest. This is an unofficial, transformative story, written and assembled by a human author with the help of artificial intelligence. All original characters and worlds belong to their respective creators. Now, make yourself comfortable and enjoy the reading. If this story helped you relax, dream, or simply enjoy a peaceful moment, please like the video and subscribe to Fiction Mage for more stories. During our last meeting, unease began to settle more deeply over Kalm. At the Demoiselle Café, Bluebell noticed Broden and Laris speaking quietly about the roads, patrols, and dangers drawing too close to town. Though they tried to protect her from the truth, Bluebell could feel that something important was being kept just out of reach. Even surrounded by familiar faces, warm pastries, and the comfort of routine, her peaceful world seemed more fragile than before. Now, on to the next chapter. The Blue Flower, a fan fiction from Final Fantasy VII. Part 1, The Tiny Bud. Chapter 4, The Notice Board. Wednesday came bright enough to make unease look impolite. Kalm shone under a clean, early summer sky, its canals catching strips of blue between the stone houses, its flower boxes leaning out of windows, as if they had been waiting all night to gossip with the sun. From the terrace doors of the Demoiselle Café, Bluebell could see the square roofs glowing beyond the canal bend, and the great Mako tank standing in the distance with its usual patient hum. It sounded harmless in good weather. Everything did, if the light was placed kindly enough. She had slept. Not deeply, not without waking, but she had slept. No smoke had followed her into morning. No stars had glittered above fire. Still, the last thought from Tuesday remained tucked somewhere under her ribs, the shape of a question her room had refused to answer. Laris and Broden, black coffee, a table that had seemed too quiet, her father's hand on his own arm, as if he were holding a door shut from the other side. By breakfast service, Bluebell had folded the thought into the day's work. There were cups to count, the chalkboard to correct, because Paco had written carrot muffins for Thursday, with a flourish so large it made the muffins appear vain, and a note to place near the pantry door, reminding everyone that the blue-lidded honey was not for tourists who believed the word local meant inexpensive. "You are glaring at the honey," Paco said. Bluebell set the jar straight. "I am supervising it." "It looks intimidated." "It should," she added with humor. Paco leaned one hip against the end of the counter, sleeves rolled as always, dark hair tied loosely at the nape of his neck. A faint line of flour marked his wrist. He had been shaping rolls since sunrise, and still looked as if he had simply wandered into the kitchen by accident and improved it. "Do you want me to move the carrot sack?" "It is looking at the honey with criminal intention." "The carrots are for tomorrow. They may wait their turn," she answered. "A strict household," he said, gravely. Monsieur, who had discovered a rectangle of sunlight beneath the nearest window, stretched one black foreleg to the full extent of its authority, and yawned. He had already eaten, which meant he was available to supervise others with wounded disappointment. Bluebell looked at him, then at the list in her hand, then at the stack of napkins waiting near the door. Order, she told herself. One piece after another. A day built well could hold almost anything. The brass bell rang. Liana entered as if the morning had sent her ahead, as its most persuasive argument. Her in at Kalm uniform was crisp, though her apron had already lost the battle against hurry. A loose strand of red hair had escaped near her temple, and her cheeks were pink from walking quickly. She carried no tray, no laundry bundle, and no sensible reason to arrive at the demoiselle before the lunch rush. Bluebell knew at once she was in danger. No, Bluebell said. Liana stopped with one hand still on the door. I have not said anything. You are wearing the face you use when you have already decided my answer. That is unfair, replied Liana. Is it wrong? Liana considered this with the gravity of a judge, pretending not to know the verdict. Not entirely, Paco laughed behind the counter. Bluebell gave him a look that was meant to restore neutrality and failed at once. Liana crossed the room and set both palms on the polished oak. You are having lunch with me today, outside, on a bench, under a real sky, not the narrow one you see between the terrace awning and the laundry line. I have lunch here every day, tried Bluebell. That is not lunch. That is refueling between emergencies. There are no emergencies, because you arrive before they can organize. Liana leaned closer. Blue, a break is not betrayal. Bluebell looked toward the kitchen, where the heat of the stove pressed against the doorway in a familiar breath. We have service. Paco is here, cut Liana. That does not make me less necessary, replied her friend. It makes you less trapped. There is a difference. Paco lifted both hands, innocent as a saint painted by someone who had never met him. I can watch the counter. I have been known to carry cups across a room without causing civic collapse. Once, Bluebell said. Twice, if we count winter. Laris emerged from the back room with a crate of clean glass bottles in his arms. The sight of Liana at the counter, bright with intention, did not surprise him as much as Bluebell hoped it would. He set the crate down near the shelves and wiped his hands on a cloth. Good morning, Liana. Good morning, Mr. Parks. I am borrowing Bluebell for lunch. Borrowing implies return, Bluebell said. That is optimistic. Liana pressed a hand to her heart. She wounds me in my hour of generosity. Laris looked at his daughter. His expression was gentle, but not soft enough to be fooled. We can manage for an hour. It will become 2 if she talks, added Bluebell with soft despair. Then we can manage for 2. He reached for the honey jar and placed it on the upper shelf, out of the carrot sack's imagined reach. The cafe has survived storms, festival crowds, and Paco near almonds. It may survive lunch. Paco pointed at him. That was an isolated almond event. There were witnesses, Bluebell said. There were exaggerators. Liana smiled at Laris, victorious already. Bluebell held her list a little tighter. The paper made a small complaint beneath her fingers. She had 3 more excuses ready, and none of them looked strong enough to stand in such bright company. Fine, she said at last. 1 hour. Liana's face bloomed. Wonderful. And we take something from here, insisted Bluebell. I'm not paying Stamps Terrace for a slushie that tastes of melted ribbon. A tragic opinion, but accepted. I will pack lunch, Bluebell said, and the words steadied her. If she had to leave the cafe, she could at least leave it carrying something made properly. The kitchen received her with relief. There, freedom could be sliced thin, salted lightly, and wrapped in clean linen. Bluebell washed her hands, tied her apron a little tighter for the last few minutes of its service, and drew the ingredients together with an almost ceremonial care. Cucumbers first. They came cool from the pantry, their skins dark green and faintly beaded, as if they had kept a private mourning inside them. She cut them into thin rounds, each one pale at the center, and spread soft cheese over slices of bread baked before dawn. A little dill, a little chive, salt with restraint, pepper with even more restraint because Liana claimed she liked surprises, until a surprise arrived in her sandwich. Liana hovered near the table. "That is too pretty to be lunch." "Then do not eat it," Bluebell said wryly. "I said too pretty, not too holy." Bluebell stacked the sandwiches and trimmed their edges. "Napkins, the clean ones, not the ones Paco folds into boats." "Those boats have architectural merit," Paco called from the dining room. Liana opened the drawer and produced 2 cloth napkins with a flourish. "Your kingdom obeys." "Barely," said Bluebell, trying to hide a smirk. For the salad, Bluebell chose strawberries from the bowl Laris had set aside for dessert. They were ruby red and soft at the shoulders. She quartered them into a white dish, added curls of cucumber, torn mint, a thread of honey, and the bright squeeze of lemon that made the sweetness lift its head. Liana stole 1 strawberry. Bluebell did not look up. "Beef?" "Inspector," said Liana, trying to defend herself. "And what are your conclusions, Inspector?" "Acceptable. For a beginner," Liana answered, mimicking a magnifying glass with her fingers. "You are fortunate I am leaving the building voluntarily," Bluebell reminded her friend. "Voluntarily is generous." Bluebell covered the dish before further inspection could damage the evidence. She packed everything into a wicker basket with 2 cups, a small bottle of water, and a folded cloth to lay across the bench. She added lemon biscuits, then removed 2. Then placed them back when Liana made a wounded sound. Laris appeared at the kitchen door. He looked not quite rested, but there was warmth in his eyes as he watched the basket fill. "Take your time." "I said 1 hour," insisted Bluebell. "Then take the whole one." It was such a small permission that it should not have mattered. It did. Bluebell untied her apron slowly. The strings slipped from her waist, and with them went a part of the day she knew how to wear. Without it, her blue dress felt suddenly more like clothing, and less like equipment. Her hands moved once toward her waist, found nothing to adjust, and returned to the basket handle. Paco came to the kitchen door just as she lifted it. "You look suspiciously ready for leisure." "I am transporting sandwiches," said Bluebell, like it was a task she was ready to bear. "A noble burden," Paco replied. "Watch the counter and don't make me regret this," she said, lifting her index finger. "With my life," he swore. "Watch it with your eyes. They are more useful." He smiled, and it did the familiar, terrible thing of arriving before she had prepared for it. "Yes, Chef Bluebell." Liana's gaze slid from Paco to Bluebell with the precision of a knife-testing pastry. Bluebell pretended not to see. Pretending was easier with a basket in her hand. Outside, the day opened around them. The street beyond the Demoiselle was warm, but not yet hot. Sunlight lay on the stones in pale gold rectangles. A gondola drifted past on the canal, while 2 tourists leaned over the side to admire reflections that Kalm had arranged for their benefit. Flower boxes spilled blue and white from upper windows. Somewhere, bread cooled on a sill. Liana hooked her arm lightly through Bluebell's free one. See? Actual sky. No ceiling beams, no shelves, no monsieur judging your technique. Monsieur judges all techniques from a distance, Bluebell said, looking one last time behind at the Demoiselle Cafe. Then today, he will have to judge the empty space where you usually worry. Bluebell glanced back once. Through the cafe window, she saw Paco lift a chair with one hand and answer a customer with the other. Laris stood near the counter, pouring coffee. The world had not buckled. No cup had broken. No tourist had fainted from the absence of her immediate supervision. This ought to have comforted her. It did, mostly. It also stung in a foolish place she refused to name. Central Square gathered them in with colour and noise. Merchant stalls stood beneath striped awnings. Baskets of radishes and greens glowed against rough cloth. Children chased one another around a lamppost until a card player from Stamps Terrace told them to avoid the Queen's Blood table if they valued their futures. Beyond the flower beds, the Mako tank hummed beneath the clink of cups and the cry of vendors. There were more people than Bluebell expected. Travellers from the inn, farmers with sun-browned necks, merchants speaking over one another about a delayed cart, and a woman from Bellwood Variety Store fanning herself with a folded inventory sheet. Near the notice board, a few heads had already begun to cluster, but from the bench Liana chose, the crowd looked harmless. Nothing more. Here, Liana said, claiming a stone bench beneath the shade of a young tree. A kingdom. It has no table, Bluebell pointed out to her. A rustic kingdom, added Liana, emphasizing on the word rustic. Bluebell spread the cloth across the bench between them. Liana sat as if she had conquered half of Kalm by lunchtime and accepted the first sandwich with reverence that lasted only until the first bite. Blue, she said, around cucumber and bread. If the inn ever collapses, promise you will feed me in the rubble. If the inn collapses, answered Bluebell, I will be too busy listening to Mr. Broden complain that you didn't sweep up the dust properly before your unfortunate accident. Liana laughed, then lowered her voice in imitation. Please, Miss Stanlyer, put that wall back in place and get back to work. Bluebell smiled despite herself. Is he difficult these last days? He is difficult every day. That is how one knows he is alive. Liana picked a crumb from her napkin. He sent back a stack of linens this morning because one sheet had a crease that offended his sense of civilization. Then he apologized for being sharp, which was worse, because then I had to be kind instead of dramatic. Bluebell thought of Broden's hand on the chair, the way he had stood for 1 second too long before sitting. He still looks tired? More than he admits. Liana's cheer softened, but did not vanish. He says it is accounts. I say numbers are rude, but not usually that rude. Bluebell set a spoon into the strawberry salad. My father says accounts can age a person. Your father says everything gently enough that it might be true, added Liana. They ate. For a few minutes, the day had no plot beyond cucumber, strawberry, and the shade of leaves moving on stone. The salad was sharp first, then sweet. Liana told a story about a guest who had asked whether the canal gondolas went to Midgar and seemed disappointed when told that stone, grassland, monsters, and common sense objected. Nearby, 2 card players argued over whether a cactuar card counted as strategy or insult. Bluebell felt herself loosen by degrees. The basket at her feet proved she had not come empty-handed. The cafe still existed behind her, The sky did not require her to answer it. Then Liana said, "Paco looked at you when you left." The strawberry turned sharp in Bluebell's mouth. "Paco has eyes. He uses them recklessly," insisted Bluebell. "Not that kind of look." "There are kinds?" Bluebell asked with a touch of sarcasm. "Bluebell Parks, do not pretend you have never sorted human behavior into categories. I have seen you arrange spoons by moral character." "That was one winter," said Bluebell, raising a hand that swept the idea away. "That was yesterday," Liana reminded her. Bluebell took another sandwich half and inspected it for flaws it did not possess. Paco smiles at everyone. He would smile at a kettle if the kettle reflected him nicely. "Yes," Liana said, "but not everyone starts polishing the counter because he calls her Chef Bluebell." The counter needed polishing. The counter had begun seeing its ancestors in the shine, answered Liana, widening her green eyes. "You are inventing evidence." "I am arranging evidence. There is artistry in it." Bluebell looked across the square, where the Marco tank's shadow touched the edge of a flower bed. "Paco is Paco. He is kind and handsome and incapable of passing through a doorway without leaving 3 women convinced he meant something by it. That is not a romance. That is weather." Liana's smile eased into something warmer. Weather can still make flowers do embarrassing things. "Flowers do not have schedules," said Bluebell, trying to cut the discussion. "Some flowers apparently have inventory lists." Bluebell folded her napkin, unfolded it, then folded it again. Liana saw, of course. Liana always saw the exact movement Bluebell hoped would escape inspection. "I am not mocking you," Liana said. "I know," answered her friend. "I tease because otherwise you would lock every feeling in the pantry, label it flower, and be surprised when it rises." "Feelings do not rise because they are mislabeled," said Bluebell. "You say that as a baker, not as a woman with eyes." Bluebell wanted to answer sharply, but the sharpness failed before reaching her mouth. She liked Paco. That much was not a secret from herself, only from proper conversation. She liked how he knew the kitchen by memory, how he made Laris laugh, how he never took offense at Monsieur's insults. She liked his face, which was inconvenient. She liked the warmth of his attention, which was worse because that warmth belonged to everyone. "It is safer," Bluebell said carefully, "not to make a house out of weather." Liana's expression changed, only a little, enough for Bluebell to wish she had said something lighter. Before Liana could answer, a cheer rose near the notice board. Both girls turned. The small cluster had become a crowd. People had drifted toward it while they ate, drawn by the useful gravity of other people's curiosity. A few merchants stood near the front. Someone from Selva Casa Weapons, recognizable by the leather apron and the metal filings that always seemed to cling to his sleeves, had folded his arms with professional interest. Tourists lingered at the edges, pleased to have found an event that cost nothing. Above the heads, pinned papers trembled in the breeze. Liana's eyes brightened. "Come on." "We are having lunch," Bluebell said, sounding almost indignant. "Lunch has become portable." "That is not a legal argument." "It is a practical one," concluded Liana. She was already gathering napkins. Bluebell rescued the salad dish from being abandoned to civic excitement and placed it back in the basket. She told herself they would only look from the edge. Curiosity was not participation. It was practically caution. The notice board stood on the west side of the square, close enough to the Marco tank that its hum lived under every public announcement. Its wooden frame was crowded with Kalm's ordinary needs: a barn repair request, a warning about leprechauns near the first bend, a festival notice in Mayor Bellenger's neat hand, Queen's Blood challenges, a missing blue scarf, and an advertisement for John's Pies. Fresh paper had been pinned in the centre. The ink was still dark. Mayor Fritz Bellenger stood before it, as if the board, the square, and possibly the weather had gathered by invitation. He was dressed for confidence. His coat sat smooth over his shoulders. His collar was crisp. A gold pin caught the sunlight at his lapel. Bellenger had a way of holding his hands that made every pause look prepared. He smiled not broadly, but with measured civic warmth, as if too much pleasure might be irresponsible. Bluebell slowed at the edge of the crowd. Liana slipped half a step ahead. "My friends," Bellenger was saying, "I will not pretend we have not heard your concerns. Kalm listens to its merchants, its farmers, its innkeepers, and its visitors. The roads that feed our town must remain open, not only for profit, though profit keeps ovens lit and children clothed, but for confidence, for trust, for the promise that Kalm remains what it has always been, a place of welcome." A murmur of approval moved through the listeners. Bluebell studied him despite herself. Bellenger did sound reasonable. That was the trouble with reasonable men. Their words arrived combed and buttoned, carrying small truths in both hands. The roads did need protection. Merchants were frightened. A delayed cart could mean empty shelves, spoiled produce, guests cancelling rooms at the inn. Safety was not vanity. But applause began too quickly under his sentences. It polished them before they had settled. "Shinra's regional patrols, as you know, have many demands upon them," Bellenger continued. "We are grateful for what support is available, but Kalm has never thrived by waiting helplessly for distant officers to remember our name. We act, we prepare, we protect summer trade before fear can damage it." Someone clapped. Several others joined. Bluebell heard the soft shift in those words. Shinra's absence had been dressed as Kalm's strength. It was clever. It was comforting. It was not entirely false, which made it harder to dislike. "To that end," Bellenger said, turning slightly, "I am pleased to announce that the town has secured the services of a capable mercenary who has agreed to remain in Kalm for the coming weeks and assist with monster trouble on the roads." Liana leaned close to Bluebell. "A mercenary. The word has legs now." Bluebell did not answer. The man beside Bellenger stepped forward. At first, Bluebell noticed only fragments: road dust at the hem of a dark coat, light armor worn for use rather than display, a broadsword across his back, the hilt catching sun in a brief white spark, dark brown hair, wind-touched and a little unruly. Then his face turned toward the crowd, and the fragments became a person. He was young, though not boyish. 21, perhaps, if Bluebell had been forced to guess, with the lean steadiness of someone who had learned early that roads did not care for uncertainty. A small scar cut through his left eyebrow. It should have made him look harsher. Instead, it made his expression more exact, as if life had underlined one eye for emphasis. His eyes were steel blue, not bright in the easy way of glass or sky, but clear and cool, holding light without surrendering to it. Bluebell realized she had been staring and looked at the notice board so abruptly that she read the missing scarf notice twice without understanding it. "Adrian Vale," Bellenger announced, From Junon. Mr. Vale has experience escorting merchants, clearing routes, and dealing with the sort of troublesome creatures that have recently tested our patience. He has my confidence, and I hope he will have yours." The crowd applauded, not wildly, but with relief made audible. A merchant near the front nodded so hard his hat shifted. The Selvacasa man looked Adrian up and down with the assessing respect of someone who judged equipment before words. A tourist whispered something about how exciting it was to see real adventuring business up close. Adrian Vale accepted the attention with a short nod, not quite a bow. He did not bask. He did not shrink. If anything, he seemed faintly amused by the ceremony, but patient with it, as one might be patient with a child who addressed a necessary chore in ribbons. "Thank you, Mayor," he said. His voice carried without force. Junon had left something in it, a harbour edge, perhaps, or the memory of gulls and metal docks. Bluebell had never been to Junon, but she had heard men from there speak at the cafe, all salt and distance and old military pride. "I'll do the work I was hired to do," Adrian continued. "If you have road trouble, bring the details to the board or to the mayor's office. Tracks, numbers, time of day, direction, injuries, guessing wastes daylight, good reports save it." A few people laughed softly, surprised by the practicality. Bellenger smiled a little harder, but not unhappily. "Efficiently put." "I try," said the mercenary. Liana's elbow found Bluebell's side with devastating discretion. "He tries," she whispered. "How noble." "Lower your voice," insisted Bluebell, furrowing her brows. "It is already underground," replied Liana quickly. The mayor reclaimed the centre with polished ease. "Mr. Vale has kindly agreed to meet some of the merchants most affected by recent delays. We want everyone to know that Kalm is not ignoring the matter. We are answering it. Together." Together became another round of applause. Then came the handshakes. Bellenger guided Adrian toward the front row, turning introductions into small public portraits. A produce merchant with anxious eyes. The potter whose nephew drove a supply cart twice a week. The Bellwood woman who explained at once that stock could not replenish itself, no matter what customers believed. Each handshake seemed to satisfy the crowd a little more. Fear liked a hand it could see. Liana, who considered hesitation a decorative object rather than a rule, stepped forward when Bellenger's gaze passed over them. "Liana Stanlyer, in at Kalm," she said, offering a hand before anyone had invited it. "If you keep guests from arriving with bite marks, Mr. Vale, our linen cupboards will owe you a debt." Adrian took her hand. "I have never been owed by a linen cupboard. They are proud creatures. Difficult to impress," Liana said, at the limit of flirtation. "Then I will work carefully." Liana's smile sharpened with delight. "And the sword is unfairly dramatic, which I appreciate on behalf of the square." Adrian glanced over his shoulder at the hilt. "It is less dramatic when it has to be cleaned." "Practical tragedy," Liana said. Bluebell had already begun to step back. It was not escape, she told herself. It was timing. The lunch basket hung from her arm. The salad dish inside needed to return to the cool of the cafe, and carrot muffins did not grate themselves. Also, Liana had clearly occupied more than enough social space for both of them. There was no need for Bluebell to stand in front of a mercenary from Junon and behave like a person who had forgotten how hands worked. She turned toward the break in the crowd. A farmer moved across her path to speak to Bellenger. The mayor shifted, caught by a question about the bend road. The crowd loosened around the edges. Bluebell found the opening and took it. Almost. "I don't think we've met." The voice came from just beside her. Not loud, not trapping her. Bluebell stopped because politeness had laid a finger on her shoulder, and she had been raised to turn when addressed. Adrian Vale stood a careful distance away, one hand extended. Close enough to offer, not close enough to corner. Liana, traitor that she was, became suddenly fascinated by the notice board. Bluebell looked at Adrian's hand. It was gloved in worn leather, the fingers cut short. The exposed skin was sun-browned and calloused. A faint line of dust marked the seam at his wrist. She could refuse, perhaps, but refusal would make a shape in the air, larger than the handshake itself. She shifted the basket to her other arm and placed her hand in his. The contact was brief. It should have been ordinary. Customers shook hands with Laris. Merchants shook hands after bargaining. Bellenger shook hands as if the habit had been installed at birth. A handshake was only greeting, agreement, civility. Adrian's palm was warm. That was all. Warm, steady, a little rough where the glove ended. Yet the warmth travelled up through Bluebell's fingers as if her body had misunderstood the scale of the event. She met his eyes because looking away would have been worse. The scar at his eyebrow caught the sun. "Bluebell Parks," she said. Her voice came out composed, which she appreciated with private astonishment. "From the Demoiselle Café by the canal." His expression changed by the smallest degree. Recognition, or perhaps interest finding a ledge. "Bluebell Parks. Then I've been given another reason to keep the road clear." Behind her, Liana made a sound that was almost not a laugh. Bluebell withdrew her hand. "Then I wish you a useful afternoon, Mr. Vale." "Adrian is fine." "Mr. Vale is accurate," said Bluebell through gritted teeth. He smiled then, not broadly, not like Paco's easy sunlight. It was a quieter thing, a line of warmth held under control. Somehow that made it more dangerous. "Accurate matters," he said. "Often," she settled. Bellenger called his name from behind them. Adrian did not look away at once. For one beat too many, his attention remained on Bluebell, and she felt, absurdly, as if the square had stepped nearer. "I look forward to seeing you again," he said. "I have the feeling it will be soon." Bluebell's manners arranged themselves around panic. "Good day." She turned before her cheeks could betray her more openly, though by the warmth climbing through them. Betrayal had already written its confession and pinned it to the notice board. Liana fell into step beside her before they had crossed half the square. "Not one word," Bluebell said. "I have many words," said Liana, trying to retain a laugh. "Keep them in alphabetical order and silent," insisted Bluebell. "He has the feeling it will be soon," Liana highlighted, lowering her voice into an approximation of Adrian's steadiness. So poor, it became insulting to everyone involved. "You sound like a sick floorboard," ventured Bluebell, almost angry. "And you sound like someone who shook hands with a handsome mercenary and forgot summer has air in it," added Liana. "I did not forget air." "Well, you certainly renegotiated with it." Bluebell quickened her pace. "I have carrot muffins to prepare." "Of course, nothing says emotional stability like grated vegetables," answered Liana mischievously. "Tomorrow's breakfast will not prepare itself because Kalm has discovered a sword, you know." "It was a very dramatic sword." "You are impossible, Liana." "Loyal," her friend corrected. "Impossible is a side effect." Bluebell tried not to smile and failed at the corner of her mouth only, which she considered a partial victory. The basket bumped against her skirt as they crossed the little bridge toward the canal street. The coolness from the cucumber sandwiches was gone from her fingers. In its place remained the memory of leather, warmth, and one steel blue gaze that had no business following her into the afternoon. The Demoiselle Café greeted her with the smell of coffee and butter, proof that the world had continued in a sensible direction. The brass bell rang as she entered. Monsieur, from his patch of sun, opened one eye and judged her absence insufficiently dramatic. Parko looked up from behind the counter. Returned intact? Mostly, Liana said. Bluebell set the basket down too quickly. Entirely. Laris, arranging cups near the back shelf, smiled. Was lunch pleasant? Very, Bluebell said, and the word emerged so promptly that Paco's eyebrows lifted. That sounded rehearsed, he pointed. It was not. Then it had natural talent. Liana coughed into her fist. Bluebell removed the empty dishes from the basket with unnecessary efficiency. I am starting the muffins, she said. Already? Laris asked. It is barely afternoon. Carrots require discipline. Parko leaned a little closer to Liana. What happened in the square? Public policy, Bluebell said. Handshakes, Liana added. Bluebell gave her a look. Liana smiled, with the serene cruelty of a best friend, who knew exactly how far the knife could go without drawing blood. The mayor hired a mercenary, Liana said more properly. Adrian Vale from Junon. He is staying for a while to deal with the monster trouble. Laris's expression shifted, only slightly, but Bluebell saw the listening begin behind his eyes. That may be useful. The crowd thought so, Bluebell said. Mayor Bellenger made certain of it. Parko's mouth curved. A mercenary with a crowd already. Should I be jealous, professionally or theatrically? You are not a mercenary, Bluebell pointed out. No, but I can hold a broom with presence. Not the same, not at all, added Bluebell. You wound my broom. Liana leaned on the counter. His sword was more dramatic. Everyone's sword is more dramatic than a broom, Parko said. That is why brooms are underestimated. Bluebell gathered carrots, flour, eggs, sugar, and spice before the conversation could find more dangerous ground. The kitchen door swung behind her, and the familiar heat rose to meet her. Here, at least, nothing extended a hand without warning. She tied her apron back on. The knot felt good. It always did. The first pull brought the cloth against her waist. The second made the day smaller and more manageable. Armor, Liana would have said, if she had seen the gesture from the doorway. Bluebell preferred to think of it as order. She grated carrots into a bowl. Orange curls gathered in soft, damp heaps, bright as little shavings of sunset. Cinnamon followed, then nutmeg, then the warm brown smell of sugar. She cracked eggs cleanly. She measured oil. She stirred until the batter thickened and shone. For several minutes, the work nearly succeeded. Nearly. Then, without permission, Adrian's voice returned. I have the feeling it will be soon. Bluebell scraped batter from the side of the bowl. The spoon clicked once against ceramic, too sharp in the quiet kitchen. Soon was a foolish word. Soon could mean a customer stopping by for coffee, because the mayor had introduced him to half the town. Soon could mean a road report pinned to the board. Soon could mean nothing at all. Men who lived by roads probably said such things, because roads taught them to leave every door half open. She portioned batter into the muffin tin with exact care. One spoonful, then another. Do not overfill. Leave room for rising. Paco passed the kitchen door carrying a tray of cups. Need anything? No. He paused. Bluebell. She looked up. Whatever he had meant to say changed when he saw her face. Or perhaps she only imagined that. He smiled, softer than before. Save me one tomorrow. If you behave, she answered. A conditional promise, cruel but motivating. He vanished towards the dining room. His warmth left no dust, no leather, no scar of light. It was familiar, dear, and difficult in all the old ways. Bluebell stood with the spoon in her hand and felt, with deep irritation, that the world had added a second column to an account she had never agreed to keep. She placed the muffin tin in the oven. Heat breathed over her face. The batter would rise if she had measured well. Carrot, spice, flour, egg, thyme. It was not simple, but it was honest. The oven asked no questions about mayors, roads, or men from Junon with steady hands. It did not care whether a girl blushed in the square. It only demanded attention. Bluebell closed the oven door. In the dining room, the brass bell rang again. Liana's laughter lifted, bright and unashamed. Paco answered someone with a flourish in his voice. Laris moved cups from shelf to counter, the small music of service continuing as it always had. Bluebell wiped a smear of batter from her thumb and tightened the apron knot once more. The muffins could rise quietly. She, unfortunately, could not promise the same. This is the end of Chapter 4 of The Blue Flower, a fan fiction in the universe of Final Fantasy VII. We hope you enjoyed your time with us. Like and subscribe if you wish to support our channel, and let's meet very soon for the next chapter. Take care of yourself and be kind to others.